this drawing, my plan for you all in doing this biomorphic pile was to incorporate all the things that we've studied so far. Okay, so if you recall, we studied compound shapes, right? The interaction of the interrelationship of shapes, where we just used, solid shapes as an example of separation, touching, union, where it becomes one, extraction, where they penetrate and they're overlapping, or where they extract from each other, right? So there's all those compound shape relationships that you can use as design tools to make decisions. Okay, so we covered compound shape relationships, and even though we talked about those relationships in terms of flat shapes, they apply to forms too. So because if you look at my hands, it's two different forms, but if you think of the outline of my hands overlapping, they're overlapping right now. And now they're eclipsing one, the top hand is eclipsing the other. Right now they're separate, now they're touching. So all of those shape interrelationships also apply to forms, right? And then we talked about, you did the value scale, and we talked about values. We talked about high key, low key, mid key, right? So high key values would be these areas over here where the light is, directly hitting the object or most prominent on the object. And then we talked about the low key values. Obviously, this is a low-key value, and some of these form shadows are low-key values. And then the mid-key values are these values right here, mid-key. I'm not finished with this drawing, so I'm giving you this kind of intercession tutorial to talk about why, the purpose, the objectives of doing this project in the first place. Okay, so you have value, high, low-key, and mid-key values in particular. You have interrelationship of shapes. And then I talked about the three strategies for creating volume, or the illusion of depth and volume, mass and volume on your shapes, is by applying cross sections. The example of cross section in this drawing is where I'm starting to segment this piece, and these are like literally becoming cross section, not just cross contour, but actually slicing into the form. And then you have cross contour, obviously these are the cross contours, and then you have value. So I want you to notice the relationship between how the form shadows are laying on these forms in relationship to the cross contour. There is no right and wrong way to apply your cross contour in terms of what direction you're using. Like I can go in any direction and apply the contours as long as they're describing the bulging and carving and curvature of the surface of the form, or in more, these are more slick surfaces. So I'm not also talking about the texture here. So I'm not just giving you the cross sections and the cross contours. I'm also trying to get you to understand that the behavior of the surface of the form, the cross contours, help you, if you know your light source, or if you decide your light source, will help you map in the shape of those form shadows, because it follows the behavior. Light hitting the object follows the behavior of the surface of the object. Okay. And then the cast shadows, so this object is casting a shadow onto this object, also are going to follow the contours of the surface. The cast shadow on the ground is like a plane, because the ground is a plane. If the ground were hilly, then the cast shadow would follow the behavior of the hill. So cross contour is really playing a huge role in where you place all of your form and cast shadows, and where, the shape of the light areas. Now, the other thing that we talked about and played with was 1-point perspective. So I wanted you to apply 1-point perspective in your pedestal. You guys created little squares and used 1-point perspective to create a cube. Well, there's no difference in how you apply 1-point perspective to any shape or size of shape, right? The same rules apply. So I think some of you got confused with that and just sort of made like whatever and didn't apply a horizon line and a vanishing point and converging lines, right? And that's okay. This is drawing one, and it's a learning process, and you're going to learn as much from making mistakes or misunderstanding as you are from like understanding and getting it right the first time around. No one understands and gets things right the first time around all the time. It's just not possible. The other thing I want you to understand about the horizon line when you're talking about like a landscape. So this pile on top of this pedestal is sitting more or less on top of a surface, like a ground plane. And then this is negative space is the sky plane. So if you think about light, the behavior of light hits surfaces and then bounces back. And the reason why you see is because light is hitting surfaces and it's bouncing off of those surfaces and entering your eye. And then you're seeing with the back of your brain and your visual cortex, right? So if light's not hitting any particular surface, then it's going to be black. It's going to be void. It's going to be dark because there's no light hitting it. Well, in this case, all of this negative space, the sky plane, light's not hitting, there's no clouds or anything for light to bounce off of in this particular, in our, image. So light is not hitting anything back here. And so it's just dark because light's not hitting anything to bounce back onto anything. Okay. So when I'm talking about a horizon line in terms of a sky plane and a ground plane, above the horizon line is going to be the negative space because the ground plane is still going to be a surface that light is hitting, right? So if light's hitting it, it's going to be part of the area that isn't dark. Okay, so now that's what can be confusing is that if you're thinking about just the positive space in terms of the objects and the negative space in terms of the stuff that's around the objects, yes, it can be confusing to some of you just colored in all of this dark and you just sort of left your object as if it were like floating out in outer space, right? It had no ground plane. So if your pedestal's sitting on top of something and not floating, then then the ground plane is going to be lighter. You're going to have a darker cast shadow, and then you're above the horizon line in the sky plane is going to be the negative space. Okay, so for this assignment, I was wanting to see how you guys apply everything that we've learned so far. Of course, we're not really applying sighting and aligning in this project, but we could fabricate an assignment based upon all the other things that we've studied. And this is the one that I came up with because I really want you guys to be able to manipulate. Not just draw something, but then once it's drawn and you start shading it, be able to lift out and make other choices. For instance, this was a separate form than that up here first. And then I didn't like that. So I just started like joining them together, using those shape relationships to join them together. If you want your projects to look really good in the future, I just want you to know that being an artist isn't like a 2 or 3 hour here and there kind of thing. I mean, it's a really big time commitment.